In this second video, we're going to look at the ridge. So modelling in detail of the ridge. We looked at overall balance, tone and colour in the first video, and now onto the ridge. So there it is. I don't know what you think is the most important part of the picture. I think for myself, the water is easier to capture than the ridge. The ridge has a number of quite distinctive features, which I'll talk about with you. So let me show you this ridge in some sort of detail. One of the things I really like about the ridge, and in putting modelling and detail in, is the line of it, that line that meets the sky. So we've got like a very, it's not a straight line, for sure, that's obvious. And there are little drops here and, valleys and hills here. There's a beautiful kind of dagger-like quality as the ridge heads off into the distance up to Sugarloaf Rock. I've looked at some maps of this area, and it's about a 15 kilometre distance from Yallingup up to Sugarloaf Rock. So that's why the ridge does appear to drop away, to disappear. And also, as we know, it starts to get a blue hue to it. So we've talked about that before, and ideally you would already have had that progression from a sort of a greeny colour through to a bluey colour as your ridge goes down. So one of the things I would do in this modelling and detail section on the ridge is to make sure that I've got an accurate shape to that ridge, because it is quite distinctive. And if I just show you some other paintings, just samples of other people in the group and what they've done. What I tend to see, I know this is a blocking in stage, what I tend to see is more extreme undulations in this ridge. So I'm sort of losing that quality of it disappearing. It's quite a bit thicker up here as it gets to Sugarloaf Rock. And so what I've noticed is that when I've seen people painting, they've tended to, whereas I was to load my brush up and drag it along on the edge of this ridge, I notice other people kind of dab more at their ridge and, paint like this. So my direction to you is, for a long straight line like this, get your paint loaded up get your brush loaded up with paint, and then quietly flip it over if paint's coming through on the other side, and get that colour that you want. You can also trim the shape of this ridge by adding down sky as well. So you can approach it to get the line you want. It's a junction point between sky and ridge. You can approach it from both sides with colour. So that would be one thing that I would look at in your ridge. To what extent has it got these sort of flowing lines to it versus a more kind of, I guess, a less recognisable view of the ridge. And so what I'm trying to do is create an image here, a painting which someone could be having a look at it and go, oh, well, that's Yallingup, isn't it? Looking north up to Sugarloaf. A couple of other things about the ridge. It's in the modelling, in the detail, is that it has these cliffs. Now you will remember when when I provided you with a canvas which was already primed and already had the composition on it, I'd sketched that out. I had those lines which were indicative of these cliffs, and if you've ever been to any of these beaches up towards Three Bears and the like, you would know that to get down to the surf, to get to the beach, you usually have to go through some sort of pathway or some sort of series of steps to get yourself down. So I would say that you need to make sure in your rendition of this ridge that you're allowing for the cliffs, because they are a feature. They drop away towards the end, but they're certainly a feature in this earlier part. So they get up to about here, and then they kind of wind around to this beach at Yallingup. So I have spent, I put a little bit of effort into that. It's not perfect by any means, or not finished by any means. So I can show you a little bit about how I'd use this rigger brush. The rigger brush is a very thin little brush. I'm going to mix up some paint. Let's see what we got here. Ooh, that was black. Okay. So what I'd done there was I'd got some black from here and just made a little pad of it. And I'll do the same with my burnt umber so that I've got a little bit of this sort of ready to go and well laid out. So I'll take another brush now, and I probably don't want that in there for the moment. It's just not going to give me the control I want. So I grab a little bit of liquid, you know what the story looks like, a little bit of this burnt umber. The painting in this area is more tonal than hue related, so it's not like I'm trying to get a hue correct. It's more that I'm trying to get a tone correct. We all know what that paint phthalo green is like. So I'm just getting that off my brush because it's just, as you know, it's just dynamite. And that's probably, you know, I wiped my brush off and probably got enough of that there. A little bit more liquid just to get the movement. And maybe just a little bit more of that. I'm really guessing at my so I'm trying to load my brush up. I haven't mixed a lot of paint and probably should have mixed a little bit more. So I'll just pick this up and bring it a little bit closer so you can see this. So what I'm going to do with this brush, it's used in a sort of a striping kind of fashion. You can use it to create these lines on the ridge. You obviously have to be mindful of what the colour is that you're mixing, or whether it's too dark or too light. So I'll just grab a little bit more of that colour. I haven't mixed a lot of it, but I seem to have exhausted that. So those sort of stripes, they might be a little bit on the dark side and a little bit too regimented. So I could easily just put them down and then maybe smooth them off a bit and maybe get rid of some of the density of that colour. So I get rid of a bit of it. It's just another way of keeping a bit more control over those. So that would give you the ridge, and you'd vary your tones with dark versus light on that. One of the other things you would do, you can see here how the ridge comes into the ocean at times, here and breaks up that nice straight line. So likewise, you could play around with this brush or a smaller brush. So I'll just get a little bit more paint on this. And then I'm just looking to try and push that dark area down into the water. So trying to make it look like a little bit more broken. So you can see I've started to achieve that look there. So it's not just a ruled straight line. And I think I did tell you earlier on that I did tape this up with masking tape to get a pretty straight line. But now I'm starting to break it up a little bit. So you be very, very carefully just bringing in that ridge, excuse me, and then that would make a more realistic line for that. Also with this area up here, we've got some, the vegetation tends to head up the hill. So I haven't really mixed good colours here, but this is a little bit darker, as you can see, as it's going on. And you know that I do want to increase the darkness of my ridge. So this might be a little way of just adding in some strokes here, which start to darken up that ridge in a way that I wanted to. So you're using your rigger brush for that, and just choosing your colours accordingly. And of course you can always wipe this off if you feel that it's not suitable. So I'll go through and darken this. I'll make sure that's blue. I'll make sure that's a nice straight line, the cliffs, and then the undulations, so some of those strokes going up to create a hint of it being a rising landscape. And then I think that's pretty much the ridge done. So we'll finish that ridge video at this point.